Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being patient. We are getting started now on this snowy winter night. My name is Joanna Tschudy. I'm a member of the society, and I'm also the community coordinator, the community development coordinator for the Calgary Horticultural Society. Welcome to our new Seed to Table series offered in partnership with the City of Calgary. The focus is on eliminating and minimizing waste, pollution, and conserving resources. It's a shift away from the throwaway mindset to one that extends the life cycle of goods, food, and resources through better design and continuous reuse, so nothing goes to waste. We're going to show you how some of our ideas on how to do that tonight. The Seed to Table series is a low input growing initiative that goes through each of the steps required in a gardening journey. The classes and resources in this series will help you to become increasingly self-sufficient, to save money, and to reduce waste. Before we get started, we would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that we are broadcasting, working, living, and playing and gardening in the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. And as always, a couple housekeeping notes before we begin. Please keep your microphones muted during the presentation, unless, of course, we're open for questions. Generally, we take questions at the end, but tonight I think, Kath, we're going to be a little bit more organic and responsive. So please feel free to type them into the chat and we'll address them as we move through the evening. At the end of the workshop, we'll add a link to an evaluation form in the chat box, and we would love your input on that to inform our future programming. And a little bit about the Horticultural Society. We are a registered charitable nonprofit organization celebrating 115 years this year of cultivating Calgary's gardening community. Our mission is to encourage gardening for the enhancement of our environment and quality of life. One way we do this is through programs like this one. So you've heard a little bit about me off the top, and joining me is my ever faithful Kath Smyth, the horticulturist with the Society. How are you tonight, Kath?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. So this whole notion of working in partnership with the city on the circular economy program is near and dear to both our hearts.
Yes. And you just have to look at our bins.
So we come by it honestly, this notion of reducing waste, reusing things, upcycling products that we have around the house, basically trying to eliminate barriers to gardening and using what's at hand. So we both dragged most of our recycling bins into the studio.
And my families.
Yes.
My family, I made the mistake 2 years ago of saying that I really needed some egg cartons about this time of year. So now I probably have 10 living in my living room. Plus, then I collect the rolls for the toilet paper. So living in my spare room now are 4 bags of rolls. To my family and friends, I don't need anymore.
So this is community building in action right now. But this is also, it's February 28th. It's snowing outside. It's cold. Not many of us are, we might be itching to get gardening, but not many of us are doing any digging outside. So these are things that we can do in
But the sun is staying longer.
Yes, there are changes. The trees are budding.
Yeah. And we have, I think, what did I say, an hour and a half more daylight? The sun set at 6:15 today.
So not enough to really get sunburned yet, but
yeah.
But there are things that we're doing this time of year, and it's all in this preparation and planning for how to be really thrifty and smart and environmentally minded in the garden. So a lot of us already practice this way. A lot of the instructors that will be joining us through the Seed to Table initiative already have this in their pedagogy and what they've been offering for years, season after season. And now we get to do this neat partnership with the city. Yes. And really sort of formalize it and push it and promote it in that way, because it's about time, right? It's about time that most people jump on the bandwagon.
Yes.
So tonight we're going to show you some things, just little tips and tricks that we do throughout the winter, in the season, and why we do them and how we do them. But maybe first we'll talk about planning.
That's an important stage.
Okay.
Honestly, I often doodle around. I've got pads of paper right now at this time of year in my kitchen, in my living room, and in my office. So Joanna and I decided, I don't know when you were first planning a house and putting furniture in your house, what you did to fit it onto a paper. So what we did was Joanna very cleverly drew out a lot plan.
Sort of a generic urban lot. This might be a little bit bigger than some people are working with. Can we go to the detailed camera? Is that? Can't? Okay.
Oh,
okay. Well, hopefully everyone can see
Do you want me
this.
to pull it forward?
Okay.
I'll do the,
Okay. The Vanna White.
I
Okay.
mean, all my only assigned detail is to get the sun out. So I'm ready.
So before we start thinking of hauling, toilet paper rolls and neat little pieces out of our pantries and recycling bins, we have to really think about where are we growing and what are we doing, and how does the land that we're working with inform what we're doing. So are we growing food? Are we growing roses? Are we growing all of it? Is it a new house? Are we going to live there forever and ever? Are we going to move soon? Do we have kids? Do we have a dog? Do we live by Fish Creek? Are there deer jumping over our fence? There's so many things that we need to consider. So first, you'd look at sort of structural pieces. So where does the house lie, the garage? Where does it all situate itself on the property? What hard structures are already there? Is there a dedicated walkway? Is there a fence going around? Are there existing hedges? That kind of thing. And then a patio, if you're so lucky, right?
Yes.
So all these things that are sort of like the skeletons of your property. And then we'll flesh it out with gardening, right?
That's right.
So number one, we, just like us, we need water, we need light, and these are things that we need to grow, and so do your plants. So we're going to look at exposure. So we can spin this any way you want.
We want.
Do you want to say sort of, we're sort of
Let's go that way. So okay.
North would be this way, south down here, obviously west and east. So if you're a vegetable plant, let's say, because this seed to table has a huge focus on growing food. It's another notion of eliminating waste and just bringing our diets closer to home, not so much trucking. Maybe we're saving money in that regard too, sometimes. So you'd look at your exposure, and then that will determine where different things like sunlight and wind are going to be coming from. So should we stick a little tab on our sun?
Yeah, let's get our sun up here.
Okay, so before we stick it, Kath, do you want to talk about how the sunlight changes across the year?
So this is west, and at this time of year, the sun hasn't come too far north. So if that's west, it's probably sitting down here right now. And as the year progresses, we gradually see how the sun starts to get higher on the sky, and we get it a little more. So this would probably be about where the sun would sit in the first of summer. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and if you look at the fact that as of tomorrow, there's 21 days till the first day of spring. So we got to start counting. Yep. So this would be about high noon on a sunny summer day.
You can pull that off if you need to.
I'm going to pull it because the thing that I've noticed that happens in the hot days of summer, because this is almost the exposure of my yard, my sun moves right up about here. Mm-hmm. So it's reflecting all the way. There's no shadowing from this side, and we're getting more and more light as it goes. So placing and following the sun is one of the ways that you plan putting in your plants. But then we deal with, in most mature yards, mature trees.
Yes. So when we might be following the sun right now and thinking, oh, I'll put my vegetable bed over here. But if you're new to a space, or you're thinking about putting a garden in that hasn't been there before, I always recommend that people live in the space for at least a year.
That's right.
Settle in, figure out, the sun would be here now. So if we go out and we start to plan and measure and do all the building prep now, that's going to be a disservice to these plants later in August, when that sun, August, September, when that sun is setting way farther north.
Yes.
So these plants might actually be getting shaded by a fence down here, whereas they might be a better exposure up top. So most of us also kind of inherit big trees, which are great, because let's kind of put one back here.
There's the privacy. They're necessary, and they are good for windbreak, and they are good for And I mean, and if you're lucky enough, you inherit an apple tree or a fruit bearing
You
tree.
can put a couple back there. These
Yeah.
are sort of arbitrary, but
So,
in what I've noticed is as we start to move into more drought-like conditions in
Yes.
the last 4 or 5 years, the
yes,
shade from a tree can be very helpful.
very valuable.
Yeah.
I had to take down my apple, and I was so disappointed in what it did to the overall environment of my
Mhm.
garden from the fact that the moisture level went down and I got less shade. So I
Mhm.
had to change what I planted there for vegetables and flowers.
Tree canopy is valuable.
Very
So
valuable.
if we can work with, again, treat this also like part of that skeleton of your property. Don't cut down a tree so that you can plant a vegetable
Yeah.
garden, unless the tree needs to go and it's diseased or it's on its way
Yes,
out.
exactly.
But consider that canopy not just from the human perspective. This is habitat for
Birds.
wildlife. This is habitat for insects, and some of them could also be sort of fruiting and give some privacy too. So if
That's
your neighbor's
right.
on the other side of this fence, well, maybe you've got some pretty trees here that can
And
do
it
all those
aids your
things.
environment. I mean, having a few trees around brings in the birds, but it also brings the insects, the pollinators.
I'm a
So-
big proponent of not just having everything sort of siloed and separate.
Yes.
So if I came into this house, or this is my big elm tree or spruce tree, what have you, and then I've got some trees in the back, and I was thinking about what trees to bring in, I would consider the sort of seed to table mentality where you're trying to check multiple boxes with one planting.
That's right.
So I would love it if I could get pears or cherries or apples off of a tree. Also shade, privacy, habitat for wildlife. Pie, exactly.
I wonder if there's a pie tree.
Applesauce, all that. So if I can be, thinking in terms of multi-stacking functions on what I'm growing,
That's
then
right.
even better. And so maybe we can we'll throw in some.
What
let's
about the
say-
shed?
Yeah, so we always, maybe there's a shed, or maybe you want to put some more hardscape structures in. So let's just say our shed is sort of near the gate. All these side areas are often really underused, but it can be a great spot for storage, or it can be a great spot for creating more garden beds, because there's always room for more.
That's right.
So where would you put a vegetable bed if this was your house, Kath? Where would you think? And let's say you love to grow heirloom tomatoes and hot season veggies.
Well, I want to look at the vista from the windows of my house to see that.
Mhm.
But I like to observe my vegetable garden. So I'd probably put a main producer right here,
Okay.
or a nice diverse planting there. And then I'd probably go with tomatoes near the garage for the windbreak factor.
Okay.
And
I made a keyhole bed. So maybe we'll take our beautiful sunshine off. We kind of
let's
know where
move
that
this
is.
in. Yeah.
So keyhole beds are a great option for maximizing square footage.
Yeah.
You can
Mhm.
this is a raised bed. You can kind of step into the center of it and garden on all three sides. You could use the verticality of your fence along there, so you're using all.
You can go
kinds of-
horizontally, going up with vegetables.
Yeah.
So many people look at what they're planting, and I saw a garden once, and they'd planted their peas on the edge of the bed, and they were cascading into the lawn.
There you go.
So they had a basket, they had a thing holding it up so they could cut the grass.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we can put some more keyhole beds. Remember, you want to have enough room for access around.
Yes.
You want to grow some tomatoes, you said,
I want to put
along
them
the side of the house.
Yeah, I want to either go
Or
there
garage.
or there.
Okay. And why would you put something up against a building like that?
For heat.
for
It
heat,
can be
okay.
a heat trap. Tomatoes are a heat trap. Need a heat trap. They need warmth. They need
Maybe
the
even
heat
sneak
trap.
one in here?
And this is the west light, so it's going to get. And this one up against the house would be another valuable spot to be keeping them. So we've got lots of that, but we shouldn't forget putting a flower garden in with things either.
Yes, and
so
not everything has to be a raised bed.
no,
That's a good point.
that's right.
We can think about some of our shrubs being those multi-purpose plantings. So maybe we've got some shrubbery down along under the trees. Maybe these are hascaps. If you
Raspberries.
have raspberries, again, some of these sort of more neglected side spaces that are hard to do much with, maybe that's where you let your raspberries go wild, and then
Exactly.
you can really be
Exactly.
making some jam.
That's right.
So you can put some other plantings in the side. We're having fun. You don't want to crowd things out too much. You
I
can
think we
decide
should
where.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
right there.
That's good.
Yeah.
So now you've got this space that was sort of good bones, and we fleshed out where you can be growing some food. And this looks like a whole lot more room to me to be growing food, but this is a good start. So you start to think about water layouts. Yeah. So again, that water, we know where our light is coming from. What about water? Where can we get water from besides the tap?
Well, why don't we think about rain barrels and maybe positioning some rain barrels, some good spots to put them. I mean, this garage is a great source of rainwater because it's going to have eaves troughs. It's going to have a downspout. So it'd be one way to have
we had it here by the patio, or if we even shifted it back where it wasn't. If you can get your downspouts to come down and collect into a rain barrel, even better. And then that can feed your trees on your garden bed. Off the house, so we can collect a lot of water off of our rooftops and into rain barrels. So, and there's all kinds of awesome little systems where you can trickle it to places.
That's right.
So again, maybe you've got another rain barrel here, and that can help you sort of get through and feed the rest of the garden there.
And thinking too, though, even though we are doing rain barrels, you might think about where the hose tap is and how far do you have to drag that hose to water things.
Yeah.
So that also becomes, say, for instance, your hose gets positioned on the side of the house. Or in my case, my hose is on the back of the house and on the front of the house. So because my house has a garage attached to it and the bungalow, my tap, I have to own 100-foot hose when in point of fact, I should just have a 50-foot hose. So you have to think about what position you put your beds in, how they are maintained from the watering.
So this is, I mean, it's fun to just sort of stick little pre-cut little things onto but this, I think what we're trying to get across is just the importance of planning.
That's right.
So
and a plan like this gives you a movable space to work within. I mean, if you're like my sister, she used to keep her plan of her living room in her kitchen. And every once in a while, she'd decide she was going to move a couch. So she'd just move it on the paper first. Yes. So we can look at this for about the next 2 or 3 weeks and go, oh, well, I'm going to just move this over here. And as the snow starts to melt, you can see, because you want to think about coming out the back door and maybe going around to the front, going in the front door. And you've got to start thinking about your pathways and where you're going to put stuff. And yes, we put a bunch of vegetables in the backyard.
Yeah.
But why not why by this hedge, why don't we put a vegetable garden? Or, just some simple picking things, some spontaneously picked things.
Yep. Or eventually if this, maybe this hedge already is sort of a diverse planting, but over time, if let's say it's a cotoneaster hedge, like a lot of Calgarians have, you're suffering from oyster shell scale, instead of saying, well, I'm going to replant cotoneaster and keep battling this issue, start to diversify your hedge and put in things like haskaps, put in things like
raspberries, Nanking cherries, Saskatoons,
currants, like a currant bush makes a fantastic hedge. You can shape it. It's not going to get the same issues that with the oyster shell scale, and then you can also pick fruit from it.
That's right, and it becomes very valuable to your food and to your table. But there's no reason why you can't start introducing that as you go. But don't think of this as something that has to be done this week, this year. This can be phased, and that's why you keep your little cutouts, so you can just keep moving them around.
That's right. Have your friends and family look at it. I see a comment about where's the compost bin. Yes, exactly.
Good thinking.
So, greenhouse, think about, again, in that beginning piece, think about what do you want to do? Greenhouse also, if you have ideas for where you'd want a greenhouse.
But you see, I do my compost bin back in here.
Yep.
One of my friends, Abby, from the Rose Society, he has the best compost set up under his big spruces in his back corner of his yard. And you should see it. It is an amazing setup. So you could do something like that in a corner. And as long as you can get forward and backwards with the garden waste, there's no reason why you can't put your compost bin in.
Yeah. My bin is, I would say, like a compost bin, you'd want to think about where just access, and
Yes.
don't put it too far away from the kitchen door.
No, I was just going to say
In the
there is
winter,
another
anyway.
issue. In
There's
the
more
winter
shoveling to be
months,
done.
unfortunately, my compost bin is in the way back corner, and we have so much snow right now that it's taller than the dog. So she won't go out to the compost bin for me. So I am right now existing with a compost bin just over the gate, but I have to deal with that.
So one of the courses that we offer, Design Your Yard,
Yes,
would tackle a lot of these questions in depth. And so it's a four-part series,
Yes.
and you can sign up for that class throughout the season. I see a lot more chats coming in. Vegetables for shade. Could you guys move the chat box in just a little bit? Thank you. Always under trees. So depends on the tree. And what I notice with my vegetable growing is leafy greens tend to handle shade a little bit better than other vegetables. If you're just growing it for the leaf, things like lettuce, spinach, Swiss chard, some kale, those can handle
they take
shade.
the shade quite easily.
Yeah. I wouldn't under trees. One thing I love to do, and everybody's different. Everyone has a different gardening style. But if I'm going to start to think about planting under my trees, I think in terms of guilds. So what type of family can I build under my tree? So I usually, and also because I'm a landscape designer, I love the look of things that go lower to mid height to your tree, that kind of lead your eye up to the focal point, which would be your trees, or a structure like a gazebo or something like that. So I would consider planting under a tree first, under sort of the drip line area, fruiting shrubs.
Yes.
Landscape, like just beautiful, just aesthetically pleasing things that can handle some shade. Again, haskaps, currants, things like rhubarb, things that can just, they're sort
my
of like
rhubarb, my friend Dave's rhubarb grows under his apple tree, and it's the most healthy rhubarb plant I've seen in years. And
I wouldn't
it's always
say doing it under a spruce tree.
No, not under a spruce
under
tree.
a deciduous tree, guilds are a fantastic place to start. And then on the outside of your shrubs, you can start to think about veggie.
I'm going to
plants.
put this down now.
Yeah, maybe we can move it to the back.
I'll
here
move
just
it
for
to
now.
the back here.
There's more questions here. Ideas for greenhouse planning, please. So if we're looking, where would you put a greenhouse on your property? If this was your property, or exposure wise for a greenhouse, do you want that full sun?
I think personally that I would put it over in here, except that if you're going to use the greenhouse year round, you do need some of the light of the sun to go that way. And when you do a greenhouse, consider all the options of the wind, etc. So up against the fence, so it'll give it a windbreak on one side. And in the summer months, it's fine, but it's tricky. And I myself, I would go and talk to a greenhouse expert, like the guys at Garden Retreat. I can't tell you how often I have visited them and heard some great things, and I always thought that I had a fair handle on it. But when you're planning a greenhouse, don't run the doors north and south, run the doors east and west. And that stops the winter wind. If you open that
circulation,
it's air. And any greenhouse that you get, you should have venting of some sort so that you can get the air circulating in it. And when you do start to grow in it, you might need to invest in a fan. So you want to have access to electricity to run a fan.
Yes. And a timer.
So
if you actually, this is really, I love that question, because if you want to know more about growing in a greenhouse, we have one of our Seed to Table initiative classes on the 26th with a fantastic instructor, Elaine Rood. It's called Growing in a Greenhouse. You can register. Again, all of our classes are on our What's Happening page on our website. And then we also have under resources, our own dedicated Seed to Table page.
That's right.
So if you want to know more about the classes, go to our website, calhort.org, look under the resources tab, and there's all of our current classes for March. We'll have most of the rest for the season up within the next couple weeks.
And ask, if you do take the greenhouse class and you get a chance to ask Elaine about her own greenhouse, ask her about the issues she has with breaking her heart and having to take the tomatoes down in the fall.
Yeah. I've noticed for myself, a lot of folks will use greenhouses to extend the season. So it's not necessarily a year-round endeavor, although some people really do go full on. But a lot of folks sort of use them like cold houses, sort of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a friend who does use hers as pot storage, and then
Nice.
come March, and it's time to get some of her plant material out and start dealing with it. It's
Should we tackle some of these other questions? There's some
sure.
really
Let's
good ones
do
coming
that.
in. Can you plant vegetables under pine trees?
No.
So I would say generally the shade is too much. It's hard to grow much under spruce trees.
That's right.
Generally,
and their
what
root
we
systems,
have more of.
their
Pine.
root systems are very shallow, and they collect all their moisture right up in that shallow root system.
Can we clear the air on the acidity thing? Is it acidic, or is it the fact that they're heavy feeders?
They're heavy feeders.
Okay, so they don't change the acidity of the soil.
No, they don't
Thank
change
goodness.
the pH. They used to test under the spruce trees and then out in the middle of the lawn at the zoo, and the pH was exactly the same from the middle of the lawn to the under the spruce trees. That's
it would
the
take
reason.
too long, I think, to change the pH of the soil.
Way too long. And when you look at spruce needles, they take so long to break down. Half your problem under the spruce tree is the fact that they gradually form a mat, and they're trying to hold moisture in for themselves. They are water hogs. They want that water, so they're going to stay as much as they can to create their own environment. And if you were to take a mature spruce tree, and it's this tall, and if you were to lay it down once, and then from that tip, lay it down again, that's how far out their roots are searching for water.
And it's not big, like, 3
No,
foot.
no,
There's little fine root hairs that
that's
are
right.
competing
And
with
they're not
your
acidic.
lettuce,
They're,
so.
I mean, in an ideal forest world, in the 100-year-old forests, gradually the soil does become a little more acidic.
Yeah, but that's because it's a stand of spruce.
That's right.
That have been growing
Yeah,
there
for
more
centuries.
than the tree's lifetime.
That's right.
So the best thing I say to plant under a spruce tree is a boulder or a bird bath, or just create a mulched area, and you can start to build up the soil a little bit if you can keep it off the trunk of the tree. But I would put your veggie growing somewhere else. Can you put raised beds over creeping bellflower? Will that smother the weeds sufficiently? Oh my gosh. I don't, for liability's sake, I don't know what I would say to that. I would say probably one of the better ways of killing creeping bellflower is to smother it.
That's right.
I would really be clear if you're going to put raised beds there, that you're not just putting the raised bed with the soil, because then you're just like, hey guys, here's some more food. Come on up through whenever you feel like it.
Yeah.
I would really put a dedicated barrier, like multiple layers of cardboard, water that all down in between.
Yeah, make sure you water the cardboard and then put the next.
I'm talking like 10 layers of cardboard. Creeping bellflower, no gaps. Like you'd have to run it up the sides as well.
That's right.
I don't know, while you're doing it, you might as well put down some hardware cloth for ground squirrels and, voles and stuff. So you'd have to just treat it like bulletproof, I guess. Neil, I'll let you try that and report back to us. I would say yes, but make sure you have a barrier.
Yeah, you've got to have a barrier under there.
And it still might not work.
But creeping bellflower, if you work at it,
yes,
and gradually keep depriving it of light, and it's not, don't dig into it, because that makes the little roots, the little parsnip roots, just they go, oh, thank you, I'm just going to grow new ones. So put some cardboard on top, wet the cardboard, and it'll do the trick.
We've got lots of good questions.
Oh, yes.
Rainwater collected off an asphalt roof. Is there a contamination issue in, for example, chemical runoff? Yes.
Yes.
So again, and I'm hoping that we can get some irrigation classes into the seed to table programming. When you're collecting rainwater, you always have to look at your roof system.
Yes.
And there's issues around bird poop and all this kind of thing. So generally what I've heard anyway is that with asphalt shingle roofs, you're looking at sort of the first run, you'll get a lot of sludge.
Yeah, you'll get all of the sludge and stuff.
And let that go. Just let that go into your lawn or into a mulched area, away from food plants. And then you can, the older the roof gets, the less it's coming off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And plus, if you age the water in the rain barrel, the asphalt gradually sinks to the bottom, and you do get the sludge. But by not disturbing that, you can get rainwater off the top. Personally, I wouldn't put it on a food crop. I would go in and use the water from my rain barrels to water the rest of the garden. And I quite often just take the lid off my rain barrel, or I use the tap and run it and go around and water my containers and water that sort of thing. I got a new roof this year, so I'm trying out fiberglass shingles. They have a lifetime warranty. However, I noticed that the big rainfalls after it was put in, there was none of the stuff coming off the roof. So I'm waiting.
No gritty in your
no
rain barrel?
gritty in my rain barrel. So we will see. It's a question of doing that. But Alberta Health has a brochure on their website that talks about rainwater off your roof. So do read that and take it that way.
Take it into consideration.
That's right, definitely.
Here's a question. Do I need to cover all my plants to avoid having plant bugs move in again this summer? Last year, more than half of my garden was infested by these pests. Please advise. Thank you so much. I feel for you, Mary. So plant bugs are good and bad. It just depends. I think they're all good because they're coming from nature. They become bad to us when they eat what we want to eat. So I have, Kath, I think it depends who you talk to, and it also depends on the insect or the animal that's coming into your garden space. For myself, I battle with aphids every year, and the last few years have been really bad because we've had a real lack of water at the end of summer and high heat. So that's already stressing those plants out, and it's like a beacon for the bugs like aphids that are like, oh, do I hear a stressed plant? Let's all
move in. Moving in.
This plant is weak. It's a prime target for us. So they move in and they do their damage. And I really try, sometimes I'll spray just a blast with the hose, tends to work pretty good. I'm talking about an apple tree. So I'm not out there pinching, but it's relatively young, so I can still reach most of the canopy, and I'm spraying the hose straight up underneath the leaves into the nooks and crannies.
Making the environment uncomfortable for them.
Yes. And so how do I know that I have aphids to begin with is that I see ants coming and going up and down that tree. Yeah. So the ants are there sort of farming and protecting the aphids for their honeydew, which they secrete, which is like sweet to the ants. And then the ants are protecting them. So if I were to go in and spray them with some sort of insecticide, first of all, I'm probably killing other bugs that are beneficial. And then if I'm taking away the food source of a predatorial bug, that predatorial bug will never show up. So to me, I look at it like that overlapping sort of predator-prey life cycle that we learned about in biology class, where you have an explosion of a prey animal. And it seems like Armageddon in our vegetable gardens. We get very worried. We want to run to the store and buy a product and obliterate everything. But if you can hold off, that predator population will increase enough to start to control it. So really what it requires from us is minimal tinkering and patience.
That's right. And I mean, if you're talking about a bed in ground, yes, you can put some covers on them. There's some white fabric called Plant Guard. It's a finer fabric than the Insulate, which is the one that protects your plants from what would you say, frost, etc.
Yeah,
but
frost,
the Plant Guard, if you get it on just the right way and you leave it on, it stops some of the insects from getting in there. For instance, carrot rust fly. I put it on as soon as I've seeded my carrots, because otherwise, as soon as the little green leaves up, that little fly comes along and lays his eggs. And as soon as the carrot starts to form, there go the eggs hatching, and they'll do the issue. There's also a wonderful thing out of Airdrie. Airdrie. Yep. There's a company called Garden, Gardn, netting. And they have a netting that goes over and I did it this year. And I put it over my cabbages and my cauliflower and my broccoli. And I didn't have to go after the cabbage white moths with my tennis racket.
So Garden Netting Solutions is a fantastic
corporate
member with the society.
And they're good hail protectors too.
That is the number one. So hail bounces off if you've got it put on properly. And then it also does, It won't stop all bugs like flea beetle, but a lot of the larger flying bugs, creepy crawlies, will not make it through.
Okay.
Okay, a couple more questions, and then I think we should
We
move
should
on
move
to
on
some,
to cleaning
out
out
of
our
planning.
rubbish bins.
Is there any issue in having pine cones or other cones mixed into your vegetable growing medium? I don't have any problem with putting it in my mulch. So
Yeah.
like you said, if it's all one thing, like all pine needles or spruce needles, it'll form a mat. So if you can, diversity is your friend. If you can mix it
That's
in with
right.
dried leaves, dried grass clippings, I don't see any problem. Just sometimes don't walk on it barefoot because
It won't do your vegetable growing medium very much good to have all those extra hard pieces of wood to grow into there. And sometimes when you throw spruce cones in there, you suddenly end up with a forest of baby spruce seedlings growing in your vegetable garden, which you don't want. And it's really hard to get root crops to grow into anything that has a diversion, like a pine cone or something like that. So I don't recommend it, and they take a while to break down unless you're willing to get in there with the shredder and shred them. But I like Joanna. I like them as mulch.
You know what I do is when in doubt, I put it in the compost pile.
Yes.
So generally, just like my avocado peels or pits, they take up forever to break down. So you get the center of the cone, which to me, I don't mind it. I'm not fussy when I do my vegetable garden, when I'm top dressing with that compost, because to me, it's just additional organic matter that will absorb moisture and slowly release it through the summer. So to me, I just put it through the compost pile first, and then it comes out sort of half mulch, half soil.
Okay.
Yeah, and I leave it chunky, and my veggies have no problem with it. So last question, any advice for beds beside a sidewalk? Is there anything special outside of sunshine to take into consideration? Yeah, I think next to a sidewalk is interesting because you have human traffic, animal traffic. So yeah, there's a lot of things to consider. Wind probably would be a bigger issue.
Yes.
People picking or being curious about it. It just depends on the property. I think if you've got room for it, an in-ground bed is really pretty.
Basketball.
Yeah. Basketballs, yeah. People sort of making shortcuts through your yard, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and they'll always cut the bottom corner. So I usually tell people when I'm putting something on the edge of a sidewalk bed, I don't plant right down to here. I leave a bit of a gap because you're shoveling snow onto that corner. You're walking up that. So you need to think about those things.
I think if you're in the planning phase, a good place to start for most homeowners would be to look at your real property report.
Yeah, and also learn where the city right of way is.
So yeah, if you're actually going to build something, you need to look at your real property report to see if you're in a right of way. So if you're in a utility right of way, that's not utilities going into your home. That's the city's utilities that might be under that sidewalk or under the roadway. And so they would be needing to access them at some point. And so if you've built a raised bed, that might be dismantled or be in the way. So get to know your property, and plan for all things accordingly. So maybe a good segue from here would be so thinking of water.
Yes.
Saving money.
Yeah, let's talk water. But Meredith, I'm going to say, she gets out her water solutions. Meredith, the salt is an issue when you put ice melter down. But look carefully because there are some that are animal friendly. And there is one called Ice Beater. Believe it or not, it's made from beet juice. And it works like a darn. It's just that it sold out on me this year, but it is well worth using. Anyway.
That's good. Okay, so we both collect rain in rain barrels.
Yes.
I have 2,000-liter totes that are in my little no man's land on the side of the house. That's where all my water runs.
Yes.
And I keep it there. Also, you brought, I don't know if we can see.
I'm gonna move it over.
Okay, it's a big heavy thing. Okay. So first tell us what this is. This is show and tell for
This is an olla.
Okay.
Not an ola, which is hello in Spanish. This is an olla. And what this is a water vessel that you bury under the ground. And I don't know if you can see the staining. The first couple of years, I left it a little high off the ground. And there is a lid that goes on top, but I think it's somewhere in the Neverland called my garage. But anyway, what I do with it, or did with it for the first few years, was I put it in with my tomatoes, and you bury it into the ground and you fill it with water. And I first saw this in a garden in Mexico and was fascinated by the fact that the guys would come along to water. They'd take the lid off and water it.
And so this is unglazed.
This is
terracotta.
unglazed. That's right.
So
and
it sweats water out.
That's right.
Okay.
And it sweats it out. And those 3 years that I put the tomatoes in with it, I had the best rooted tomatoes I've ever had. The only problem was that we had to get the tomatoes out and then dig this thing out because the roots just literally encompassed it. And it was amazing to watch this. And I mean, over the years, I've used upside down pop bottles and all those tricks, and they work well, but this is my favorite thing. And honestly, this was a great thing to do for things like a tomato because the tomato absorbed the moisture as it needed it. I then put it in with my broccoli, and I got the best broccoli. I was supplying 2 families of 2 children each, and myself and husband with broccoli because of these.
So what I understand about oil, first of all, props to the people who understood that this would be a good idea in the garden. So I think this is in response
it's a very
to
ancient,
a dry climate gardening strategy. So in your,
Yes.
do you want, here,
I got it.
okay, careful, Kath.
I can move these things.
In a place like Mexico, or even say Drumheller, or even Calgary, we are a high altitude dry climate for gardening. So it can be a real challenge.
That's right.
To keep water, to collect and keep water where we want it. And so the Oya is really cool because you have this reservoir of water in the root zone already. It's not in your rain barrel in a plastic bin far away from your roots. It's actually in contact with the roots. And as I understand it, the plant's roots sort of hug, they
hug it for the
touch
moisture.
this container and pull the water when they need it.
Yes.
And so the plant is actually in control of when it's absorbing water, and it's not just up to us when we come along with a hose or a watering can.
Those 3 years that I kept it with the tomato patch were the only years I didn't get blossom end rot on my tomatoes.
Which is ultimately an issue of calcium uptake, but that has to do with water flow.
That's right.
So, okay, so
let's go with your invention.
So a thrifty alternative.
Recycle.
This is not called an Oya, but it's called creative bottle usage. So again, these are things. This is an old mayonnaise jar, and this is a 2-liter pop bottle. So the idea with this, and again, very simple, similar, but not as cool as the Oya, but effective all the same. This is your water reservoir. And you would also bury it. You bury the whole thing with a little bit of space around it. So it's not that the roots are going to be in contact with it, but you're putting it near where the roots are. You don't have to bury the whole thing. It's nice because you do have to take the lid off. So the idea is water is in here. The sunlight is blasting down on, let's say, the top half or top quarter of this setup. And it's just condensation. So the water is actually evaporating up into this outer sleeve, and then it just drips down the
naturally.
outside.
It's a natural slow drip irrigation system, which for those of you who use drip irrigation, that's one of the things that's so advantageous with drip irrigation. Doesn't spray water around, it keeps it down in the ground.
So I learned about this through friends in Latin America who are growing, they're growing on a super steep hillside.
Yes.
And the seasons there are 2 seasons. It's either rainy season or dry season.
Yes.
So rainy season, they're looking at diverting water away by using swales and berms. And in the dry season, they need to keep the little bit of water that they get and use it very preciously. So this was one way. Each shrub that went in the ground along these terraced planted hillsides had one of these next to it.
Coffee plants.
Yes.
I think that was the first place I ever saw them, was with coffee in a coffee plantation, was this idea.
Yeah. And again, thinking of monocrops and that.
That's
so
right.
It's sort of a mixed permaculture planting, but they were experimenting with how to conserve water. So that this is one way that we could recommend. And the Oya as well. You can pick up Oyas around the city.
Yes, they are at garden centers.
You can buddy up with a local potter, and
that's right.
It's an unglazed
It's
pot.
just an unglazed pot, and
you can make your own.
That's
I've
true.
seen tutorials where you take two terracotta pots and put them together. And
Yes.
it's a little bit more complicated, but you
Vern,
can.
one of the instructors with the DIY class, she makes her own. She glues them together and sinks them in with the 2 clay pots. It's one of those things. And if you've got some old clay pots that have got a few chips, works like
4 bottles.
or a mayonnaise jar. What a great way to use
So you lose your 10 cents, but you're keeping this. You gain so much more. So you're keeping this
But does
out
it
of the
take
landfill.
up much counter space in your house because you just leave it?
So that's one. This is
Well,
one
I
way.
mean, I speak from the experience of having to live with the egg crates that my family bring me for planting in the spring.
We have a question about your Oya that I can see.
Okay.
How do you? Okay, Oya is OLLA.
That's right. Yeah.
And then, do you dig it up every year or do you leave it in the ground?
I've left it a couple of times just because when I'm planning my crop rotation, as I say, the one year I decided to take the tomatoes and not put them back in that same bed. So I decided to grow the broccoli and cabbage crops in there. So I just left them in place. I did go in and try to get some of the old root off of them and added some new compost, but it seemed to hold up fine. However, the last couple of years I've been taking it out because I can feel the clay starting to
flake off
of it. So I bring them in.
Yeah,
I do bring them in.
I think it depends on how big. You can find smaller Oyas. The other thing is you'd probably want to taper off your watering so that it's not sitting in the ground. It will leach out all the water. I doubt you'd have it freeze, but if we and they're buried, so the soil will temper.
Well, as the soil started to warm up, I did start to dig around it just to see, because inquiring minds need to know these things. So I started digging around it to see if it was emptied out. And I will tell you, don't stick your arm straight down in it, just because there was a mouse at the bottom drinking. So it was an excitement thing. I gave the dog its adventure for the day.
That's why you keep a lid on it, also to keep it from evaporating.
That's right. You don't want it to evaporate. You don't want critters going swimming. So those are the things.
So not only in conserving water are these things useful, but in terms of maximizing yield. So you've done your plan, you've laid it all out, you've started to plant things, and then you don't want to just leave it to chance, right? You want to make sure that you're using, like we talked about, you're using vertical spaces like fences or shed walls, or creating some trellising. It can be as simple as a stick in the ground, a bamboo stake, or you can get elaborate with it. So again, using vertical spaces. We've talked about mixing flowers in to attract pollinators.
That's right.
If we're attracting pollinators and other bugs, then we're probably going to be able to handle those pesky insects as well.
That's right.
Or the insects, sometimes bugs are helpful to us at one part of their life cycle and not so helpful at others. So we just have to strike that balance with what we're planting.
Have you told the cabbage white moth that?
They don't listen to me.
They're definitely. I remember spending an entire summer with my tennis racket sitting by the vegetable garden, whacking them until I found the garden netting.
Garden netting works wonders.
Right.
Or the grow the oh my goodness, the
plant guard.
Yeah, the plant guard works really well. For multiple reasons, but
that's right.
Spacing is important too. So we could talk a little bit about spacing.
Yes.
We know, we've heard things about square foot gardening and succession planting. So it kind of comes down to knowing what you want to grow and knowing what it looks like. We can pick a cabbage and know that a head of cabbage is that big, but the plant itself could be 3 or 4 times as big.
Yeah, so I had some cauliflowers. I was so excited.
So I think, again, sort of looking at how much room is that plant going to take up in its mature size, so that you've got good airflow. You're out there actually harvesting and picking things. I pick outer leaves off my cabbage, my collards, all of my cole crops. Yeah. Broccoli leaves are great in a stir fry or soup.
I thin my beets and I eat the leaves. Yeah. I actually thin my radishes and eat the leaves. They're best. They're the best thing.
We don't have to just focus on the cherry on top. The particular crop we're growing, like a lot of the plants that we're growing, parsley, you could eat the stems, the pepper leaves, some of the leaves of pepper I've been taught by garden
parsley.
Friends.
You know why? The other reason I like parsley is that umbrella shaped foliage, especially the curled parsley. I like it because sometimes when you lift the leaves up, there's a spider or something living in there.
Ladybugs love to be in there.
Ladybugs
Yeah.
love to be in there.
Yeah.
And you do want to attract spiders.
Mhm.
You really do, because spiders are the good guys. If you've got a pest problem, i.e. aphids,
Mhm.
spiders move up into the aphid population and really help. It's like I plant a border of sweet alyssum, you know,
Mhm.
the nice traditional
Mhm.
white border. The spiders move in there and they do their work overnight, and
Mhm.
they're out there house cleaning and doing some of the
Nice.
work on things.
Spiders don't eat our plants. They're eating
No,
other bugs.
they're eating other bugs. They're insectivorous.
So companion planting is another way.
That's right.
It's something that we've been doing for millennia. As long as humans have been planting, we've been planting. And I sort of mentioned it in these guilds off the top. So again, maximizing your yield, eliminating or reducing waste as much as possible, using as much of the plant as you can. Not being too squeamish about things having a little bit more fiber than others. Radish leaves are great. You know, I think
And radishes, here I go again. They're my favorite vegetables. But radishes are a trap plant.
Mhm.
When you get spinach leaf minor, the radish gets it first. So then your spinach doesn't get spinach leaf minor. So very valuable plant. And then you let it go to seed, and the seeds are delicious. And then you save some so you have it for next.
It gives you something in every part
That's
of its
right.
cycle. And the other thing, radish is a perfect example of embracing shorter season, cold tolerant crops. So again,
That's right.
another way to maximize space. We're in Calgary. Yes, we might have a sort of a typical season would be 110 growing days, but not all of them are, you know, amazing hot summer days.
No.
And our nights can be cold and it can be windy and we can get hail and all kinds of things can happen to us and often do. So if we can get something that matures and can be picked in 28 days,
That's right.
why the heck wouldn't we do that? So start things early, get things growing.
This is the perfect plant for a child's science project at school.
Yeah.
The first thing to germinate. In fact, radish in Greek means fast growth. So
well, there you go.
Let's dish her out,
named.
man. Let's get a radish.
Yeah.
What?
Okay. And let's see, we've got some questions before we keep moving along. I love the composting questions. How long should manure age before placing it in a garden? I always give things at least a season in my compost pile, especially if it's fresh manure. I would just let it rot down with the rest of my
manure,
compost.
20 years.
20 years.
20
I've been
years.
rushing it a bit. One
they only have one stomach and they're not good chewers.
Mm-hmm.
So they eat all that oat and they leave a lot of the seeds whole. Mm-hmm. And then it goes in their manure. Mm-hmm. And then you end up with oats growing in your garden. So horse manure should be really, really well aged, and whoever's you're getting it from should be turning it a bit for you before you go and take it. The bottom of the pile is the best pile.
Because it's been sort of under there the whole time.
That's right.
Where in the garden would you put the oyas or this? So this was a mayonnaise jar. It's just that's a lot of mayonnaise. So it took me a while to get to this. And I would put this right close to the root zone. So Kath, you had mentioned
peanut butter jar.
They don't have to be this big, but I just made it this big.
You need the condensation space.
Yes.
You need to be able to get that condensation space so that it will rain on that. So
if I were to plant this, in my garden and you can't see the table. So I would put it in the middle of a grouping of maybe 4.
Yes.
So that it could benefit all 4 of those plants.
You see, and with my cabbages and my broccoli, etc., my Oya waters 6 broccoli plants.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of water. So that could probably hold like 7 or 8 liters.
It holds 8 liters because I measured one day just to see.
This is less than 2 because I capped my 2-liter bottle. Let's see. How important is it to change what you plant in specific spots each year? For example, crop rotation. Can I plant carrots or beets in the same place year after year, or should I change it up each year? I would change it up.
I change it up. Yeah. I have everything on a sort of a plan. It's just like us putting 1, 2, 3, 4 flower beds, vegetable gardens. Mm-hmm. That's going to rotate probably counterclockwise. And you plant in guilds. I like to plant familial plants together,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll plant root crops. And then the following year, I'll do things like peas or beans because they've got good nitrogen content in their roots. They're a legume. So you can just sort of keep rotating through, and it works. It works really well. But crop rotation is really important. And
I like to keep pests on their wings or toes.
Yeah,
Like
keep them
if I have
guessing.
an infestation of carrot
rust fly,
then I want to move. I don't want to be predictable to that pest. I want
That's
to move
right.
my carrots somewhere else. So
I made mine lawn edging for about 2 years because I got so sick of them being in the back garden. So I moved them to the front yard, and that worked really well for about 3 years. And then I rotated them to the back alley. So it's how you rotate is really important.
Yeah. So it's kind of in avoidance of certain or preventative measures in certain ways, and then also to add. So you're adding things to
That's
the
right.
soil.
That's right. Ants in the garden.
Ants in the garden, are they a problem? So that it depends. I think, again, if you're looking at an infestation, then it could be a problem. Ants tend to not eat my plants. They're eating, like the spiders, they're eating bugs. So
yeah, and they're eating other bugs.
They like it where it's dry. They like it where it's protected and where they can excavate and dig. They seem very happy to always be digging and bringing up soil. So if it's damp, and if there's a lot of traffic there, they tend to move on. And I've had issues with ants. I've gotten them in the corner of my raised bed, and it just took forever to get them out of there. But every time I'd water, I would just flood that corner because there were so many. Their activity was stunting the root growth of my plants. So I just asked them to leave by keeping the hose on them.
I put in a hotel for them.
Yes, tell us about your hotel, because this is a really cool way of.
I get a grower pot. Usually one that, if I look at them carefully in the recycle bins at the garden center, I look for the old tree pots. I try to get one that holds about a 5-gallon container. And I make sure that the holes are on the sides, not on the bottom. I fill it with soil, whatever kind of soil I can find. Preferably, I look for stuff with organic material. I fill it up and I stand it on top of the anthill. And I leave it there and I start to watch it. And it usually takes about 4 or 5 weeks for them to achieve surface, because they think they've put a high-rise hotel in for them. So they move up and they gradually populate it. So forgive me for this, City of Calgary, but I think it's valuable to what they're trying to do. So I take said pot and the soil and I place it in my black bin. And then it goes to the landfill and it can aerate there, because that's a really good way to deal with
You could dump the contents into their green bin.
Yes.
I'm not sure that the ants would survive the composting facility, but
and I tried that, but they found all the little nitty gritty around in the compost bin or the green bin before I cleaned it. And they moved in there. And then suddenly I was pulling the bin out one day and I thought, oh, I have ants in my compost bin. I wait till exactly the day they're going to pick the rubbish up to put the black bin in the black bin. And it seems to work like a darn, and I've eliminated them. But my other favorite is Elaine Rood uses frosted flakes.
Okay.
And you put them in your blender and you turn them into a fine powder and you put them on the anthill. And they're very heavy in sugar, so they'll feast on it. Then they'll start to feed on it, and the population dwindles, so they move. And they're not there.
So you're relying on their gluttony.
Yeah, to move on the population, move house, move on.
I think the trick with most insects that are going to be a problem in the garden is to just be consistent with them. And don't resort to extreme measures. So again, a blast of water or some creative relocation is probably all you really need to do. And then sort of let that natural predator-prey cycle sort of
evolve.
Install itself.
And I mean, the more you attract pollinators and other insects, for instance, dragonflies, believe it or not, eat mosquitoes.
So give them habitat.
Give them habitat. Wasps, etc., are very valuable pollinators, but they are drawn to the deck or to where you're sitting, because either you're eating meat, because that's part of their prey cycle, but they're also looking for moisture and they're looking for a place to roost in the sun. So put a puddle at the back of the garden, and it'll have rocks and water gathering there. You put a little bit of clay on the bottom, and they will gather there at the end of the day more so than come to your barbecue. And that
Depends
eliminates
on the time of year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It looks okay. Crop rotation is just moving crops to a different close by bed sufficient, or do they just need to be far away? They don't need to be far away. You can literally move potatoes to the next bed. I just don't keep the root crops going to the same beds. I just keep moving on.
Yep. In a situation like this, you could literally just hop. You could hop your crops from one bed to the next, and if they move from here to here, that's probably sufficient enough.
That's right.
To deter or avoid the issue. I learned the hard way to not plant potatoes close to sunflowers. Are there any other common flowers that should not be planted near vegetables?
Well, sunflowers are allelopathic. Sunflowers don't want anything to grow near them. Sunflowers have a root system that doesn't allow anything but other sunflowers to grow with them. Hence, when you see a farmer who grows sunflowers, that's all he's got in that field is sunflowers.
Their root system's pretty intense too.
Yeah, it's very
if you
tight
try to pull
root
one out,
system.
you really gotta yank on
and
it.
they will fight the other plant material to not let them establish.
Are there any other flowers that you would say to keep out of a vegetable garden or not nearby a vegetable garden?
Not particularly. I think all flowers are valuable. I mean, honestly, as I've said to you before, I really like dill for its flower because the umbellifer, which is the top of the flower, attracts the pollinators. It also keeps the cabbage white. You see, have I declared war on cabbage whites lately?
I think so. We're not even. They're still dormant. Kath.
Yeah, I know, but I'm waiting. Yeah. But anyway, I like that. I like. I can't think of it.
What flowers? I guess this is not answering the question, but flowers that I do like, maybe where you could focus with some of your plantings. I love comfrey. There's a kind that doesn't spread and get everywhere. If you're going to plant the traditional kind of comfrey, I would put it on the outside of your fence, like next to your rhubarb or something.
Yeah. And your horseradish.
Borage, I love. It's always totally swarmed with bees and butterflies. The little skippers love the borage, and I can eat the flower. They self-seed really nicely. The flowers taste like cucumber, by the way, so they're really yummy. Zinnias, the marigolds, I think, are often a really highly prized flower in the garden because they tend to deter a lot of pest bugs.
They're a trap plant. It's just like if you plant nasturtiums in the garden and using the vertical space for your the nasturtiums, you get these trap plants and they trap. Actually, the aphids think you planted the nasturtiums just as a buffet.
Aphids, yes. So I have learned from that and tried to put hanging baskets around my apple tree to get the aphids off of the apple tree and into the nasturtiums.
That's right.
I'm not successful yet, but maybe one day. Which flower is good for avoiding the cabbage moths?
Dill.
Yeah, dill would be one that dill is a great one because you're attracting a lot of the pest bugs to it.
Yarrow.
And also you're attracting a lot of predatorial bugs. So bugs in general love dill.
Anything with an umbrella-shaped flower like yarrow. Yarrow is a great attractant to any of those problems.
Okay, Suzanne has a lot of good questions. This was my battle this last summer. Suggestions for keeping birds from eating my pea plants before I get peas. I would guess those birds are sparrows. We're looking
or robins. I've had the robins decimate. I was always taught by my grandfather that you plant a row for the birds and you plant a row in behind for yourself.
There you go.
But that garden netting my gosh, that was the best thing ever.
Yeah. So that's what I've had to do with my peas and my lettuce. So the house sparrows come and they they just shred the leaves.
They come in the midday sun and they stay till
they swarm in there, and they shred up all my leafy greens and my tender new pea plants. So I will just learn to net them.
That's right. And I used to, one of the things that I used to do as well in my garden that I had a fair amount of success with was bamboo canes, tin pie plates, cut them into strips and just hang them off the sticks. and they make a little clattering noise. And if you keep them about 5 to 6 inches off the ground, they don't like that. They don't like movement. And windmills, you know, the little inexpensive windmills, you put a few of those around, and that actually they don't like that, so they won't come around. And it actually, the magpies don't like the windmills.
We are coming close to the end of our time.
Let's talk about some stuff.
I wanted to talk a little bit more. So we talked a little bit about maximizing yield. We got through a lot of really great questions. Thanks. Keep them coming, everybody. Reducing waste. And now we can talk about sustainable money savers. So these are, you've already shared with us the toilet paper tubes that you're,
and you can fold the bottom, fold the bottom in.
So my version of that,
and I fold the bottom in so I can have it hold soil. And that's why you need it. Everyone needs a tablespoon. Everyone does, because it fits the toilet roll perfectly, and you can put the soil in without wasting it. And it's actually why I keep the egg cartons.
I do a similar version. I take newspaper and I just roll it around a jar, and I make myself a little pot like so. And I fill that pot with soil, with my potting soil.
Yes.
And I put it right into a container. This had mushrooms in it from the grocery store. So instead of throwing it into the recycling bin right away, I've got my my pot. Clamshells work wonderfully. I forgot that I buy those salads, you know, those bulk salads and stuff. And I was cleaning this up yesterday, and I went, oh, there's a neat place to put my pot. So it's great because the lid of that would make a fantastic sort of mini greenhouse. That's right. To get your, then this is a great idea for indoor seed starting. So what are we doing right now? We're getting ready to do. That's right. We're learning about how to start our seeds indoors. We have a lot of the next upcoming Seed to Table class is Kickstart Your Garden with Janet this Saturday. So registration, I believe, is closed on that one. But then Planning Your Kitchen Garden, that's another Seed to Table class coming up on the 13th. Again, on our website, you can learn how to register there. Kath and I love the toilet paper rolls and these newspaper pots, because when our seedlings grow to the point where they're ready to be transplanted, or the weather's right and we can actually take them outside after they've hardened off, I don't have to tug my seedling out of here. I can just plant it directly, plant the whole thing in. And so when you're dealing with, leave a little bit of a rim, because cutworm, etc., it doesn't like going over top of it. There's a question of how do I keep the slugs off my beans? So if you, generally speaking, you would direct sow your beans. That's right. But you can always put a little collar of something around them, and that would help keep slugs off. You could also trap the slugs under a board, or a little dish of beer sort of in the ground next to your bean plants. What a waste of beer. Fill your oil with beer, leave the lid off. It'll be full of slugs before you know it. That's right. But yeah, so again, this cost me I was already buying the vegetables, the mushrooms, and I had the container. Aside from the potting mix and the seeds, I spent $0 on this, and this is how I do my indoor seed starting. So I go buy the red cups. Okay. And I fill them with soil, but then I was having trouble with finding a container that would hold them, that wouldn't turn them around. So I discovered, these coffee trays, and they hold them almost perfectly in place. And I, for instance, will start my squash ahead of time. So I'll do my 4 squash. They're all there. I can label them, and then I put them in a set, but there's nothing quite like it. And I like these red cups because I can take my garden shears, poke holes in them, my little snippers, and I can poke holes in them, and they have good drainage, and it works really well. And I was studying up on maybe finding, a plastic container bigger, but I'm not going to buy a bigger thing of salad. I barely finished this one. So, but bakery goods often come in big clamshells. That's right. Those would work really well. Having a birthday party at my house on Thursday. I'm
going to claim the cake dome.
There you go. Once you start to follow the seed to table idea of embracing the circular economy and reducing waste, saving yourself money, you will start to see things that can be applied in the garden all over the place.
Well, yeah. And I
Here's
use
another
go ahead.
one. So I love to recommend this, especially to folks who are teachers or who are in a situation where they might have to leave their seedlings for a week or so, a long weekend or spring break. So you can take an old juice jug, the 2-liter bottle would have worked really well. You drill some very small holes. A heated up paper clip works really well to push through there. Again, you cut it. This becomes your water reservoir. This gets filled with soil and seed. And then you have a self-watering pot that wicks up the water.
And the lid keeps it flat and even so that it distributes.
So when I do my seedlings like this indoors, I fill this reservoir probably twice from the beginning of April till I plant them outside. So that's like really low maintenance, which is important on indoor seed starting. So it's great for people who might be away, teachers, in a classroom setting, that kind of thing.
Well, I use my egg carton 2 ways because I'll use it to do the cardboard toilet rolls, but I also just cut the lid off and I stand the bottom into here. And I just use the shallow part of the egg carton. And I will pre-sprout my peas and my beans in these. And then I just tear them off and stick them all, including the egg crate, into it because it just breaks down and then put on a nice deep root. And I usually use the guideline of the sides of the egg carton. But I like these because they keep the soil moist and they disintegrate. And then they're easy to just keep reusing.
Nice. You're composting in place.
I'm composting right in place.
And it saves you work, and it's actually healthy for the seedling roots to not get jumbled around.
That's right. And as I say, and I do use the toilet rolls to sprout some of my flower seeds to put out in the garden.
So other stuff that I would love to share, like what are we doing? And I don't know if the bathroom just seems to keep coming into this. We're finding resources. Aged manure, toilet paper rolls.
Okay, if you find us hanging out in bathrooms, we're not there for...
We're there to scour for garden goods. But anyway, one other thing that I'm doing in my winter months, because I do want to get out and garden, but it's too soon. So I'm preparing my DIY seed tape. So I know that my beds are about 4 feet wide. And I always have a heck of a time with small seeds because it's usually windy and I get tired and I'm starting to get, sunburn or whatever. I'm getting hungry the first few days in spring. Carrot seeds, lettuce seeds, they're all really hard. Basil seeds.
Basil.
Oh my goodness.
My basil's like...
So what I've done is I've taken some toilet paper. This is again from our handy bathroom sourcing. And
Natasha, she didn't steal the toilet paper here.
Oh, this is from home. Everyone should have this. And then just like a DIY sort of like a frosting piping bag, I've just taken, again, it's flour, any type of flour that you have. I had oat flour, you could use rice, whatever, it doesn't matter. You make your own homemade glue. It's, again, biodegradable. It's not so strong that the seed won't be able to push through it eventually. It's just, you just mix it to like pasty. And then I just snip the corner and I dab for proper spacing on my flat toilet paper line. And then I put one seed in each. So it's a little bit time consuming, but I do this with my kids. I do this when I have 10 minutes, to do. I have no other plan. So I just do that. And then I can, then I fold it over and it's completely dry. And I store this with a seed packet. So my Mokum carrots. And then in the spring, I'll just sort of dig out a little furrow in my garden bed and I'll put this right in there and just lightly bury it. And I know that all my carrots.
Don't leave the end of the seed tape showing. The magpies think that's a challenge.
Right. They'll come and pull it out.
They'll just come and go, whoop. And
so you'd bury it just the same way you do with carrot seeds. Or you could, again, sometimes I'll just put a board over my carrot seeds. But if it's lettuce, I'll sort of lightly bury it. Tap it down a bit, put a label on it, and then all of my carrots should come up about 3 inches apart.
That's right.
Okay, so
No.
we're really coming up on the end of time here.
Well, we got a bit of time yet.
The chat has our evaluation in it, so we'd love to have you guys fill that. Take a minute and fill that out to inform the rest of our season with these awesome classes.
Are you going to plant anything yet soon now?
Yes, so we can actually
Plant
plant
something.
outside, which sounds
That's-
crazy. But I put violas, my little pansies, I put in my winter sewing jug. So again, wasn't from the bathroom, it's from the kitchen, but I've got an old milk jug. I've taken the lid off, no need for the lid, and I put drain holes in the bottom. So drain holes are always really important. And what I've done is cut it so that it's not fully separated. And this, in effect, is a small greenhouse.
That's right.
So when you winter sow, you can take your jug, and you've got a little bit of soil in it. And then I like this waterproof tape. You can pick it up at the hardware store. Tuck tape works really well because it'll just last the whole season. Duct tape and masking tape tend to wear away.
The duct tape tends to peel away even with the snow and the cold.
The UV wears it away. So I do winter sowing with plants that need cold stratification. So a lot of
violas, pansies.
Violas, a lot of our colder veggie crops can handle being started this way. I'm doing my marigolds, my snapdragons. A lot of our perennial flowers can be done in a winter sowing way. So, and then, sounds crazy, but you go ahead and you take all your milk jugs that are taped, labels are inside, and you put them outside. So I'll put these in another crate, like a milk crate, so that they don't blow around the yard when the snow melts away. And I just sort of bury them up to the roof, up to the top, just with this piece showing, and just let Mother Nature do her thing. And come about June, I'll see seeds starting to sprout and grow in here. And so all of these plants will have been stratified by being exposed to cold weather, freezing temperatures, thaw, freeze, and then they sprout, and they've got that much of a jump start on
Exactly.
year. So I've grown purple coneflowers with great success this way. So yeah, it's fun to experiment with. And
I grew Joe Pieweed, and
Nice.
I grew some, I can see it in my head. I did my snapdragons. They were the best snapdragons I ever had.
So do a little research. Not all seeds will respond well to this, but things that can tolerate a little cold and that actually need cold to break dormancy do really well in winter sowing.
Like cabbage. Cabbage
Did
doesn't
you
mind
say
a
at one point you bury the milk jug? Yes. So yes, I do like to, I do bury it in snow.
Yes.
I take the whole crate and I kind of shovel out a little spot in a snowbank against the
put
fence.
the crate right in.
I like to put it, don't feel like you need to put this in direct sunlight. So I like to put this in a tucked out of the way spot against the fence in some shade.
Around your shrub border, around your hedge.
Where you're not going to forget about it and it's not going to get kicked over or blown
Yeah.
over. And then I just bury it. And I just bury it because I'm trying to regulate the exposure a little bit. Like it does actually kind of insulate it somewhat.
Yeah, it does. I mean, for every 6 inches of snow and depth, you're getting about a 10-degree change in temperature.
They'll freeze solid, and that's the point.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what stratification is getting it to get cold.
Yeah. A good question, April. So I keep the lid off actually because later in the season, and even on some of our Chinook days in the winter, if the lid is on, it actually gets too hot in there.
That's right.
So airflow and then extra moisture will get in when it rains. If it rains a lot, those drain holes will run all the excess water out. So yeah, no lid. I know it seems crazy.
It's counterintuitive, but it is work.
Fun. So you can actually, and this is the time of year that you would winter sow. So I've, when I get home, I'll be finishing up my marigolds, my snapdragons, and they'll all go into a crate out into the yard in the summer.
And I'm going to do some cosmos. And I tell everyone I plant my sweet peas on Good Friday, which I do. But I'm going to try doing some of my sweet peas in the milk jugs just because I want to see how they do. But peas and sweet peas like the cooler temperatures to germinate and grow much stronger as a result.
There's so many things we can experiment with. And really you can see
we can't stay late though, you guys.
No, we have to get home and start our winter sowing.
That's right.
So there's so many other things that we can talk about. I feel like an hour and a half is plenty of time. There's been some fantastic questions that have been asked. I feel like people are really engaged and keen on finding ways to save money and garden smarter and more in sync with the environment. Use the resources we have in a really smart way, really environmentally responsible way. Inspire one another, share what you're doing, come to our classes, check out our website for ideas on classes. We'll be putting up more throughout the season. These classes are free to you, and thanks to that partnership with the City of Calgary. So it's just a fantastic thing that the society can offer to members and non-members alike. And yeah, Kath, it's been so much fun talking about planning right through to planting with you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it is. And you know, I don't think we've stopped talking since I got in your car today.
Yeah.
So I think
that's
that we'll
par
just
for the course
yeah,
with us.
with us, we just keep going. I mean, and we have some really good hints, but I'm really going to steal this idea. I think this dates back to when you first get your new house and you move your furniture on a piece of paper. Well, now I'm going to move my garden on a piece of paper, so this could be quite exciting.
Easier.
Yeah,
it's a lot easier in this format than
That's
with
right.
a shovel. Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And please stay tuned to the Society. Check back to our website and see what we're doing throughout the season. And yeah, thank you.
I hope
Happy
to see you at one of the free talks. You never know.
Good night, everyone. Happy gardening. Thank you for joining us.